The first thing I noticed was that my suitcase was missing from the closet. It wasn't a big closet, just wide enough for both of us to have a side. But her side was perfectly untouched, color-coded the way she liked it. Mine had a gap. The black Samsonite was gone. And so was my fiancée. I hadn't heard the door. No footsteps. No text. Just silence. But silence is never quiet when something's wrong. It hums. It presses on your chest. It whispers things you try not to hear. I walked into the kitchen and saw her Easter card still sealed on the counter, the one she usually gave me every year with a cheesy bunny pun and a gift card inside. This year, nothing. Instead, there was a half-empty wine glass. Lipstick smudged at the rim. Not her usual shade. And that's when I checked the calendar. Sunday, April 20th. Easter. I wasn't supposed to be home. According to her, the family gathering this year was strictly relatives only, and I, apparently, didn't count. She broke the news with a casual shrug, saying her mother wanted an intimate circle. No partners. No distractions. No offense. So I booked a solo trip. Drove 4 hours north to a lakeside cabin and told myself it was fine. Peaceful. Healthy even. I brought hiking boots and trail mix. I made a fire and read a whole novel in 2 days. I smiled at birds like some kind of idiot. And then, halfway through Easter brunch, as I sat alone on a splintered wooden bench watching a squirrel tear into a bag of chips someone had left behind, I got the first text. Wish you were here. Family brunch isn't the same without you. From her aunt. Not her. That was the first crack. Then came a Facebook tag. Someone uploaded a group photo. Big smiles. Kids with bunny ears. Her standing by the cake table in a light yellow dress. And next to her, his arm around her waist, was a man I didn't recognize. Tall. Shaved head. Gray suit. He wasn't part of the family. I zoomed in. He was holding a wine glass in one hand, and with the other, the hand behind her, he was doing something I couldn't unsee. His fingers were hooked into her back belt loop. Like it was second nature. Like they'd done it before. I stared at it for maybe 20 seconds, then closed the app. Threw my phone down onto the bench. It bounced, cracked against the wood, and I didn't even pick it up. I just sat there, mouth dry, breathing hard like I'd just run a mile, but I hadn't moved. The silence after that was different. It was loud. When I got home 2 days later, there was no apology. No explanation. Not even a lie. Just an empty spot in the closet and a lipstick I didn't recognize. And then I found the video. It wasn't meant for me. It was buried in her shared family folder. You know, the one she forgot I still had access to. The one they all used to post vacation photos, baby showers, birthdays. I saw the file named brunch_egghunt.mov and clicked. Kids laughing. Someone recording from a shaky phone. Panning across the lawn. And then, there she was. Laughing. Leaning into him. Holding his hand like it was his holiday, not mine. In the background, someone said, "Wow, I haven't seen her this happy in years." I turned it off. I sat on the floor. And that's when I realized I was the only person who believed I was still in this relationship. I was the only one not laughing. And it had been that way for a long, long time. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I opened her laptop. I'd never had a reason to before. Trust had always been our unspoken agreement. She didn't question where I went, and I didn't check who she texted. But sitting on our couch, surrounded by the emptiness she left behind, unopened mail, 2 dead houseplants, and a stack of bridal magazines we no longer needed, I felt like the world had tipped sideways. And I was the only one still pretending we were standing on level ground. The screen lit up instantly. No password. I stared at the wallpaper, a photo of us at the beach last summer. She was wearing that sunnet I hated, the one she insisted made her look mysteriously French. I looked like a man who believed his life was exactly where it should be. That made it worse. I clicked on her messages first. Nothing. She'd been smart enough to use her phone for anything private. Then I checked her email. Junk, store coupons, some vendor quotes for the wedding. And then, buried halfway down, a subject line that froze my pulse. Easter weekend details. It was from a name I didn't recognize, Dylan Hart. Sent 6 days before Easter. I opened it. Got it. Saturday to Monday. I'll meet you at the cabin around 10. I'll bring wine and those stupid lemon cookies you love. Can't wait to have you all to myself this time. No punctuation. No emojis. Just confidence. Like they were already deep into something I had no part in. But what shattered me wasn't the message. It was the thread below it. Dozens of replies. jokes, and side references. One even said, "Just make sure Curtis doesn't show up. I can't pretend to be the coworker again." My name. In their private conversation. Like I was the embarrassing footnote to her real life. I didn't even realize I was gripping the laptop so hard until the trackpad cracked under my thumb. I slammed it shut and sat back, dizzy. The air felt heavier than before, like something invisible had filled the apartment and was pressing down on my chest. She had brought him to her family's Easter. To the event I was deliberately told not to attend, under the pretense of it being just family. And no one said a word. Not her mom. Not her brother, who had shared beers with me. Not her sister, who once told me I was the common Mallory storm. Apparently, the storm found someone more exciting. I started remembering things differently. Her distance in bed. How she laughed more at her phone than with me. That one time she came home late from book club and smelled like cologne she didn't wear. I had dismissed it then, like everything else. Told myself I was overthinking. That I was the insecure one. Turns out, I wasn't overthinking. I was being overwritten. And now, I wasn't even a person in her story. I was a plot device she needed to cut before the final chapter. My phone buzzed again. It was her. "Mallory, hey, we should talk soon. When you're ready." No apology. No confession. Just we should talk. Like she'd misplaced my favorite mug or forgotten to buy milk. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood up, opened every window in the apartment, and let the cold spring air pour in. It smelled like rain and pavement and something else I hadn't noticed in months: freedom. That night, I pulled our wedding binder off the shelf, flipped through the tabs labeled venue, dress, florals, DJ, and quietly tore each page out, one by one, feeding them into the trash. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just done. Because this wasn't about fixing a misunderstanding anymore. This was about waking up to the truth I'd been too tired, too spineless to see. She had already moved on, and I needed to catch up. I didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. I told work I had a migraine, which technically wasn't a lie. Something behind my eyes throbbed nonstop, like my brain was short-circuiting every time I tried to make sense of what was happening. I sat in the same sweatshirt, drinking room-temperature coffee and staring at the chair where she used to sit during our Sunday mornings together. Her impression was still faintly in the cushion. I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it did. Maybe because it was physical proof that she had once been there, that her absence now wasn't just emotional, it was carved into the furniture. I kept thinking back to the way she said goodbye before leaving for Easter. There wasn't a hint of guilt, not even a flinch. Just a quick peck on the cheek and a "don't miss me too much." It felt like a rehearsed exit line. And now, in hindsight, I couldn't help but wonder if Dylan had been parked around the corner waiting for her. By Wednesday night, I caved. I answered her text. One line. "Tell me everything." She replied 2 hours later. "Are you sure you want to hear it?" That made me sick. As if the truth were some optional subscription I could cancel if it got too uncomfortable. But I said yes. So she called. Her voice was calm. Not cold, but disturbingly steady. She said my name slowly, like she was soothing a scared child. Then she admitted to it, not just Easter. Not just a fling. Dylan had been in the picture for almost 6 months. 6 months. That would mean right before Christmas. While we were decorating our first tree together. While she was helping me write a letter to my estranged dad to invite him to the wedding. While she was wearing the engagement ring I picked out and making Pinterest boards titled Mr. and Mrs. Wallace. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She said she didn't mean for it to happen, that Dylan was unexpected, and that it started during late-night shifts at the bookstore. That he made her feel seen in a way I apparently didn't anymore. "I never wanted to hurt you, Curtis," she said. But she had. Deliberately. Repeatedly. And somehow, she still spoke like she was the victim of an inconvenient emotional accident. Then she said the thing that finally snapped whatever part of me had been trying to hold on. "I just didn't know how to leave you without becoming the villain." That line broke me. Because it meant she chose to keep me around as a placeholder. As her emotional support system while she tried on another man like a new coat. And when she found the fit more flattering, she just stepped out of our life without telling me. Her idea of not becoming the villain was letting me rot in the dark while she danced in the sun with someone else. She asked if we could meet in person. To talk. I told her no. I didn't want to hear the rest of her carefully worded rationale in some coffee shop where she could cry performatively and hand me back the ring like it was some grand gesture. I didn't want the public setting, the apologetic eye contact, or the moment where she reached across the table like we were still something sacred. So I hung up. And I blocked her number. Then I did something I never thought I'd have the nerve to do. I drove to her mother's house. No plan. No warning. Just me in the car at midnight, heading to the same place I'd once carved pumpkins and played board games and been called son by people who now helped her lie to my face. I parked down the street and waited. All the lights were off except one, the kitchen. I saw silhouettes moving, laughing. Then Mallory walked in. She wasn't alone. Dylan was behind her, shirtless, holding a wine bottle. He kissed her neck, and she didn't even flinch. That was her new world. That was what she chose. That was what I'd been blind to while buying floral centerpieces and writing my vows. I didn't cry. I didn't knock. I just started the car, turned the headlights off, and drove away slowly, like I didn't want the moment to notice me leaving. That night, I deleted every photo of her from my phone, every backup, every message. But I kept the Easter video, not for revenge, not to show anyone, just so I'd never forget what betrayal looks like when it's wearing your favorite person's smile. 2 days after I saw them in the kitchen together, I got a letter. An actual handwritten envelope, like it was 1995 again. No return address, just my name in her handwriting. I almost didn't open it. I stood over the trash can, ready to let it fall in with the rest of the things I no longer wanted to carry. But curiosity, or maybe weakness, won. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery, the kind she used to use when she wrote notes to tuck into my lunch. Except this time, it wasn't playful. It wasn't sweet. It was 8 lines, written in shaky ink. Curtis, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just hoping someday you understand. I didn't plan to fall for him. I tried to fight it. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. I didn't want to lie to you. I just didn't want to disappear without leaving something behind. You were good to me. Better than I probably deserved. That was it. No full sentences. No effort to explain what had really happened. Just enough vague sadness to keep her hands clean. It made me furious. Not just because of what was written, but because she sent it like she was sending condolences. Like we had both been victims of something neither of us could stop. She made it sound like love was a flood that dragged her away, not something she chose to dive into head first. But that wasn't even the worst part of the week. The worst part was running into her brother. It happened at the grocery store. I was in the frozen section grabbing a sad excuse for dinner when I heard my name. Curtis. I turned and saw Jonah, 6'2", always wore flannel even in the summer. We grilled steaks together last 4th of July. He once told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to his sister. Now he looked at me like I was roadkill. Hey, I said, stiff. I didn't want this conversation. But he approached anyway. I didn't know about any of it. I didn't believe him. He scratched the back of his neck. Mallory didn't say much. Just that things were ending. I thought. I figured it was mutual. Did it look mutual at Easter? I asked. He didn't answer. Just looked at the ground like he was ashamed of breathing. You all stood there, I said. You passed the potatoes and took selfies while she played happy with some guy she swore was nobody. It wasn't like that, eh? You think I care how it looked now? I cut him off. You knew me. You watched us. You let it happen. He didn't argue. He just said, I'm sorry, and walked away. And that hurt worse than if he'd cursed me out. Because it proved what I already feared. No one had my back. Not one person had stood up and said, where's Curtis? Not even Jonah, the guy who once called me family. I left my card in the aisle and walked out. I drove home with the windows down, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles cracked. When I got home, I sat on the floor of the hallway and stared at the door. The silence felt thicker than before, like the walls were holding their breath with me. That night, I went through every drawer and packed away anything that still smelled like her. The scarves, the books she never finished, the bath salts she never used. I found our wedding invitation drafts, 3 different fonts she couldn't decide between, and tore them into such small pieces they looked like confetti. It should have felt like cleansing, like closure. But instead, I just felt hollow. Not angry, not heartbroken, just erased. Like I was never meant to be there in the first place. And then, as if the universe wasn't done kicking me, I got an email. From Dylan. Yes, him. The subject line? Let's talk, man. I almost deleted it on sight, but something about the arrogance made me click. Curtis. I know this is weird, and I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but I just want to say, I never meant for this to happen like it did. Mallory didn't tell me you were still living together. She made it sound like things were already done. I respect you. I don't want bad blood. If there's anything I can do to make this easier, let me know. Dylan. Make this easier? I read it twice, stunned at the audacity. This man invaded my life, sat in my seat at Easter, kissed my fiancée in front of her family, and now wanted to extend an olive branch like we were old high school buddies who had a misunderstanding at a bar. I didn't reply. I just sat there laughing. The kind of laugh that turns into coughing because it's coming from someplace deeper than your lungs. A laugh that isn't really a laugh at all, just noise to keep yourself from breaking. Because here's what I've learned. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come with a bang. It's a slow, smiling process, polite, gentle, deliberate. They smile while they do it. They tell themselves it's for the best, that you'll be fine, that you're too nice to make it messy. And maybe they're right, because I never yelled, never fought. I just stood there quietly while my entire future was pulled out from under me. But I'm not going to stay quiet forever. Not now. Because the truth? I'm not the one who should be ashamed. They are. And they're about to feel what it's like to be seen. It's strange how betrayal doesn't just steal your peace, it makes everything around you feel counterfeit. I started looking at my own apartment like it belonged to someone else. Every object became a silent witness. The fridge magnets from our weekend trips, the coffee mug with the chip on the handle she swore gave it personality, even the dent in the hallway where we dropped a bookshelf during our first move-in day. All of it felt like stage props from a play I didn't know had already ended. That week, I stopped sleeping in the bed. I couldn't bring myself to lie on the same side she used to claim, legs tangled in the sheets, whispering half-asleep things about dreams she'd never remember. I tried the couch, the floor, even sat in the bathtub one night for 2 hours, fully clothed, just listening to the faucet drip like it was counting down to something. And then, late one night, I did something I wasn't proud of. I drove past her new place. I hadn't meant to. I was just out, couldn't sit still, and before I knew it, my hands were on the wheel, and my brain was dragging me through a route I swore I didn't remember. It was an old rental house near the edge of town, one she had mentioned once, casually, as a cute maybe, when things between us had still felt okay. I don't know how I knew she was there, but I did. The porch light was on. There were 2 chairs out front. Only one had a throw blanket on it, draped with the same careless confidence she used when kicking off her shoes. Her car was in the driveway, and next to it, Dylan's truck. I recognized it from that first horrible video. Silver body, mud-splashed tires, the kind of truck that looked like it was compensating for something. I sat in my car with the engine off and windows down, waiting for what? I didn't know. Maybe to see her come out and look guilty. Maybe to catch a moment that felt like justice. But the universe isn't that theatrical. What I saw instead was simple. Real. She opened the door. She was barefoot. Laughing. He was behind her, hand on her waist. She leaned back into him like it was muscle memory. Then, they kissed. No fanfare. No music. Just 2 people standing under a porch light, completely sure of what they were doing. I left before they saw me. No tantrum. No tears. Just the silent kind of pain, the kind that wraps itself around your throat and squeezes every time you try to swallow. I drove aimlessly for an hour and ended up in a 24-hour diner. I ordered a grilled cheese I didn't eat and watched 2 teenagers play air hockey on their phones. They were laughing too, but their laughter sounded different, pure, untouched. Mine had been like that once. I think. Back home, sometime past 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and started typing. Not to her. Not to him. Just everything. Pages and pages of thoughts I couldn't say out loud. Things I'd wanted to scream during the phone call. The way her mother looked the last time she hugged me. The playlist we made for the wedding. How I'd found the receipt for Dylan's wine in our joint bank statement 3 days before Easter. It all spilled out like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. And then I hit save. Not publish. Not send. Just saved it in a folder called Truth. Because even if no one else ever read it, even if she never saw what she'd done in my words, I needed it to exist. I needed me to exist, not the man she walked away from, but the one who finally started naming what had happened. That night, I finally fell asleep. Not peacefully, but solidly. And when I woke up, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't going to chase closure anymore. I was going to create it. Not through petty revenge. Not through dramatic gestures. But through clarity. Through exposure. Through one quiet truth at a time. And it started with the wedding website. We hadn't taken it down yet. I had access. So I logged in, deleted the countdown timer, and replaced the homepage text with something new. There is no wedding. There is no us. But if you're reading this, thank you for caring. Just know that the man you thought she was marrying still exists, just not in the story she chose to write. I hit publish. I didn't care if she saw it. I didn't care if her family did. I just needed the truth to breathe somewhere, even for a little while. Because I was tired of being erased. And now, finally, I wasn't. The wedding website going live with that update. It felt like dropping a match into a dry forest. I hadn't expected much. Maybe a couple of confused messages, a few relatives calling it tasteless. But within 6 hours, my inbox exploded. Mallory's cousin, the one who had offered to sing during the ceremony, emailed me as simple, "Is this a joke?" Her old college roommate sent. I knew something felt off the last time we spoke. "I'm so sorry, Curtis." Even the venue coordinator reached out asking if this meant the October booking should be canceled. I didn't reply to any of them. I just watched the chaos unfold like a ghost floating above a battlefield I was finally no longer fighting on. And then, just before midnight, Mallory called. I didn't pick up. She called again. And again. Finally, she left a voicemail. Her voice was sharper than I expected, not angry, exactly, but defensive, like someone trying to steer the narrative before they lose control. "Curtis, what the hell did you do? You could have just talked to me instead of putting our business on the internet. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Take it down. Please. Call me back." I didn't. Because she still didn't get it. This wasn't about embarrassment. It wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. And maybe, for the first time in my life, I had finally stopped caring how I was perceived and started caring about how I felt. But things didn't calm down. They escalated. 2 days later, Dylan showed up at my door. I was in sweatpants, hair a mess, probably looked like I hadn't seen sunlight in a week, which wasn't far from the truth. I opened the door expecting a package and found him standing there, holding a brown paper bag and wearing a look that was somewhere between regret and arrogance. "Hey man," he said, like we were college buddies reconnecting. "Can we talk?" I stared at him. "No." He took a step forward anyway. "Look, I know this is a mess. I feel like I owe you an apology. A real one. Not that email crap." I should have slammed the door. I really should have. But something about his audacity intrigued me. I stepped back and let him in, mostly to see what kind of story he would tell when forced to say it to my face. He sat on the edge of the couch like it was made of needles. I stood by the window, arms crossed. "I didn't know she was still with you at first," he said. "She told me you two were basically done, living together for convenience, that it was emotionally over." I didn't say anything. He kept going. Then Easter happened, and I started feeling guilty. Because I saw the look on your face in that picture her cousin posted. You weren't over her. You had no idea. That stopped me. "You saw my face?" He nodded. "I looked you up. I know that's weird, but I had to know who I'd stepped over." It was surreal, standing there while the guy who replaced me tried to humanize himself. "You didn't step over me," I said quietly. "You were handed a ladder. She held it steady while you climbed." That shut him up for a moment. Then he reached into the paper bag and pulled out a thick envelope. "What's that?" I asked. He slid it across the coffee table. "Letters. From her. I found them in her old journal. Ones she wrote but never gave you. I think you deserve to read them. I didn't reach for them." "She doesn't know you have these?" "No. And if she finds out I came here, I'm probably screwed." But it felt right. He stood and headed for the door. "Whatever you think of me, I get it. But just so you know, I didn't plan to be part of this." And then he was gone. I stared at the envelope for a long time. My hands hovered over it like it was radioactive. Finally, I opened it. There were 5 letters, all dated over the course of the past year. Each one was a slow erosion. The first was a love note, nervous but affectionate, questioning where we were heading. The second talked about loneliness, about not feeling chosen. The third mentioned Dylan by name. The fourth was full of guilt. The fifth ended with, "I don't know how to love someone who still sees me as the person I used to be." I read them twice. And then, for reasons I still can't explain, I cried. Not the kind of cry that comes with yelling or punching walls, the quiet kind. Like my body had finally accepted something my mind had refused to. She had been leaving me for a long time. I just hadn't moved out yet. I spent the next morning cleaning. Deep cleaning. Not because I wanted to erase her, but because I wanted to reclaim the space. I threw out the wine glasses we'd picked together. I changed the sheets, rearranged the furniture, even swapped out the pictures in the frames. And when I was done, I took the letters and tucked them into the back of my closet. Not out of sentiment, but because they weren't hers anymore. They were mine now. Proof that I had loved fully, that I had stayed when she left, that I wasn't crazy or oblivious or weak. I was just too loyal to see the edge until I'd already gone over it. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept in the bed. And I didn't dream about her. I dreamed about silence. And for once, it didn't hurt. The silence didn't last. I should have known that peace was just a fragile pause between waves. Because 3 days after Dylan left the envelope and disappeared like some regretful specter, Mallory came storming into my world again, this time, literally. It was early afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal I didn't even want, watching dust drift in the sunlight like tiny reminders of all the time I'd wasted loving someone who had already let go. That's when I heard the knock. Not soft. Not tentative. It was the kind of knock that wasn't asking to be let in. It was announcing its presence like a verdict. I didn't move. The knock came again, harder. And then her voice. "Curtis." Opened the door. I stood there frozen for a second. Then I walked over, opened it halfway, and kept my hand on the frame. She stood there in a slate gray coat and sunglasses, like she was trying to disguise herself from the wreckage she caused. "You can't just post things like that on our website," she said. No greeting. No remorse. Just damage control. I raised an eyebrow. "Our website." She pushed past me into the apartment. Just walked in like it was still hers. Like her name hadn't already been scrubbed off every surface. "You embarrassed me," she said, spinning around in the living room. "My family's been calling nonstop. Do you even understand how much you've complicated things for me?" I almost laughed. "You mean after you lied, cheated, humiliated me in front of your entire family, and replaced me with a guy who thinks emotional depth means holding hands in a photo?" She looked stung. Good. She deserved worse. "You're being cruel," she said. "You used to be kind." "I used to be yours," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "Turns out that was my only crime." Her eyes narrowed. "Dylan told me he came here." "Of course he did." I nodded, slowly. "He gave you those letters?" she asked. I said nothing. She moved closer. "Curtis, they weren't meant for you." "Then why did you write my name at the top of every single one?" That stopped her cold. She opened her mouth and closed it again, unsure of what line to use next. But the hesitation told me more than any excuse she could have delivered. She sat on the edge of the couch, the one she used to curl up on during movie nights with her feet tucked under me like a cat claiming its space. But now she sat like a stranger in a museum, delicately, as if afraid to disturb the artifacts of a life she left behind. "I didn't plan to fall out of love," she said finally. "I just stopped recognizing who we were. And instead of facing that, you brought someone else into the picture. While I was still in the room." She rubbed her hands together. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. But it was, Mallory. That's the part you keep skipping. You made decisions. You made choices. This didn't happen to you. It happened because of you." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I fell in love with. I saw someone tired of being caught, tired of managing appearances, tired of me still standing. "I didn't come here to fight," she whispered. "Then why did you come?" Silence again, but not the heavy kind. This time it was hollow, like an echo in a room with nothing left inside it. After a long moment, she stood, walked to the door, turned back only once. "Curtis, I hope one day you'll remember the good parts." I nodded. "I do. That's what makes this hurt." She didn't respond. She just left. I locked the door behind her, not out of fear, but to mark a boundary, one that should have been there long before this. That night, I got a message from her mom. Just a simple, unexpected, "I'm sorry for everything." That was it. No follow-up. No defense. Just 6 words that held more honesty than Mallory ever managed. I replied, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." And I meant it. Later, while scrolling through the wreckage of what used to be our shared life, I found an old audio clip, one of those voice memos people forget they recorded. It was from a day at the park, 2 summers ago. You could hear her laughing in the background, me saying something corny, her telling me to stop being such a sap, and the sound of wind brushing the mic. I didn't delete it, not out of nostalgia, but because it reminded me that I was real in all of this, that my love wasn't foolish, that I didn't invent a connection. She just couldn't hold it. And now, I was finally free to make space for something honest again. Not today, maybe not soon, but someday. And when that day comes, I'll walk into it knowing I didn't crumble when I had every reason to. Because the truth is, survival doesn't always look strong. Sometimes it looks like standing still while the storm walks out the door. And finally, letting it go. Spring rolled into summer before I even realized the calendar had flipped. The shadows in my apartment got softer. The light through the curtains started feeling less like an interrogation and more like an invitation. It wasn't sudden, and it wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet kind of healing, like grass slowly growing over a scorched field. I didn't try to date again right away. That would have been dishonest. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I started doing small things for myself again, things I hadn't noticed I'd stopped enjoying. I brought out my old record player and started listening to vinyl in the evenings. I went to the park without a reason. I read a book in public without pretending I wasn't hoping someone would sit beside me. I even joined a weekend hiking group. Just a small one. 4 or 5 people who didn't ask questions and didn't know my story. That anonymity was a gift. There, I wasn't the man who got left. I was just Curtis, the guy who always packed extra granola bars and brought a first aid kit even when no one asked. One Saturday in late June, during a break on a forest trail, I ended up sitting next to a woman named Claire. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to fill the silence. She offered me a bottle of water and asked if I'd ever seen the stars from the peak after dark. I said no, but that I'd like to. We didn't flirt. We didn't dive into personal lives. We just walked back together. She told me she worked as a wildlife illustrator. I told her I used to think love was something that could be kept alive just by trying hard enough. She smiled gently and said, "Most people do." She didn't press. She just walked beside me, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost floating in my own story. I felt like someone stepping back into the world, piece by piece. That night, after a shower and a quiet dinner, I pulled the letters out of the closet one last time. I read them slowly, not to reopen wounds, but to see them clearly, to remember the truth of who she was, and who I had become because of it. Then I walked outside, down the block, and dropped them in a community recycling bin. It didn't feel like rage. It felt like relief. I'm not naive. I know there will still be days when I feel the weight of it all, moments when the ghost of her smile lingers at the wrong time. But I also know now that those moments don't define me. What does? The fact that I survived, that I stayed kind, that I didn't let her betrayal turn me bitter, that I'm still standing, still curious, still hopeful. And maybe most of all, that I learned the difference between being chosen and being cherished. Mallory chose someone else, but I'm finally choosing myself. And that, somehow, feels like the real beginning.